Good morning, everybody. My name is Uffe, and I'm the CEO of Charlie Tango. And every morning I wake up, like most of you do, and I go to work on my bike. And when I go to work, I often think about the people that I'm going to meet today, the meetings that I'm going to have, the business, the clients, and so on. And then occasionally, one thought strikes my mind. What's the future? Right? And it's really a big question. And there are so many things out there, will automation take away all low labor jobs? What about privacy issues? What will the future of design be? So many great things to wonder about, and how will we, run our agency and, be attractive for clients and partners and so on going forward. So that really takes up a lot of my time. And for that, it's really, I can see I'm not the only one thinking about that. So it's so great to see so many of you here today. We were actually, we needed to make a waiting list for this event. So popular, it was so popular. So that's great. So if anybody, any authorities ask, we are exactly 150 people in the room today. And there might be somebody who will be asked to go upstairs if we are above that number. But of course, it's a great topic, talking about the future and the trends and so on. And I'm really, for addressing that issue, it's a real privilege to be in this house, because I'm really in the company with some great personalities that spend a lot of time thinking about the future and trends and what will happen going forward. And today you will meet some of them. You will meet Alberto and you will meet Rasmus. And first you will meet Tim, whom I'm sure many of you know from previous. So Tim has been, predicting trends and looking into technology in the broadest sense for, I don't know how many years, but at least a couple of decades, and really been a driving force in many of the discussions and debates about trends. And after that, Rasmus, as I said, and Alberto will take over and talk a bit about the and user experience. So we are really set up for some great time together, and I hope that you will enjoy it. I won't say anything more than it's just, again, it's a great pleasure to see all of you and have fun for today. So Tim, where are you? Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. It's fantastic to see so many people. There are still a few chairs available, so if we have any latecomers, please feel free to get to the front and get a good seat up here. I have been looking very much forward to this day because what I'm going to present to you within the next hour is a condensed version of the research that I've been doing for the last 1.5 months. I'm going to talk about the 10 topics I think will be on the top of our digital and tech agenda for 2020. Now, predicting about the future is always extremely risky, but that's also what makes it a lot of fun. I've been doing that for quite a while, and I thought that before we enter 2020, it would make sense to take a quick look back at the predictions I did last year. Basically because all the areas that I talked about a year ago is still extremely relevant, not just for 2020, but for the years to come. But also, of course, to see what actually happened. We don't have time to go through all of them, so I'll just do a few touchdowns on the subjects that I find extremely interesting. Are you okay with that? Good, let's start. Okay, So one of my most bold predictions last year was that I said that we would see the first commercial air taxi service based on what is called electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. And a few months ago, I actually thought it was not going to happen, even though there was fierce competition around the world. But then just a while ago, the company EHang got the necessary approvals from the Chinese government to start an actual commercial air taxi service in Guangzhou, and they will be launching here in December. It is, however, a small-scale test. They have, I think, 30 different drones that can take 2 people and fly them around. But it's a starting point, and we got there. You could ask yourself the question, when will we start to see this more widely spread? And one good bet would be to look at Uber. They have been working on this for quite a while now, and they say that in 2023, they're ready to launch Uber Elevate, which are their air taxi service, more widely in different destinations around the world. So I think within the next 3 to 5 years, this is a thing that will begin to happen, not here in Denmark, but in a lot of places around the world. But it's also a great example of what happened last year, and that was that China, they kind of speeded ahead in front of all the competitors. That was another thing I predicted, that in order to know what's going to happen in the future, we have to look east instead of west. And China is taking the lead on a lot of technology areas right now. Just to give you one example, out of the patents filed last year, nearly half of them came from China. So 1.5 million patents were filed from China. That's more than the 10 places coming after, including US, Japan, South Korea, and the whole of Europe. And if we look into patents coming from AI, out of the 608 AI patents filed last year, 473 came from China. So you can kind of imagine that they are quickly positioning themselves, not just being a production country or a copycat, but a place for innovation. Another area I predicted last year was the first commercial launch of a 5G network. And that happened a month ago, also in China, where they launched the world's largest 5G network, covering 50 cities across the country. So they are now also the leader in 5G. Denmark are trying to pick up the pace. Just 2 days ago, the largest 5G pilot was launched in Helsingør, just 50 kilometers from here. And TDC basically say that they will be covering all of Denmark with 5G within 2020. So this is a technology that will happen and that we will get a chance to try out. And imagine or think about that 5G is not just an incremental improvement over 4G, it's a leap in technology. That's the technology that will make it possible for us to work much better with IoT and also with self-driving cars. And speaking about self-driving cars, that was another area that I talked about, and where US still claim to have the lead. The Google-owned company Waymo last year launched the first commercial taxi service without any drivers. And when I say driverless, I mean it really in the fact that you can now order a taxi in Phoenix, Arizona, and it will come to your doorstep without anybody behind the steering wheel. That's happening right now, and it's being rolled out in US, and it started in 2019. But again, if we look to China, there are a lot of different projects taking place over there right now. All the big tech companies like Dec13 and Baidu and Tencent are involved in projects, and there's a race going on who will be the first to launch these in a wider spread area. Will this happen? That's one of the big questions, and this debate is going back and forth. But I just want to give you a few numbers. Each year, more than 1.3 million people are killed in the traffic because of crashes, every year. That's similar to an Airbus A320 crashing every hour, every day, all year long. And that's kind of the situation we got used to. That's status quo. We're okay with that. We're okay with a plane crashing every hour and killing everybody on board. On top of that, 50 million people get injured due to vehicle crashes every year, and 94% of these crashes are due to human error. On top of that, only if you look at US, 130 million people spend at least an hour commuting to work every day. That equals 15,000 man-years lost in traffic every day due to traffic congestions. So if you add these two things together, it's a matter of when is the alternative better than this? When will self-driving cars be able to actually give us a better alternative than the kind of the situation that we have today? So I personally think this is going to happen, maybe not in 2020, but within the next 5 years, we're going to see this roll out because the alternative just needs to be better than this in order for this to be a good case. In Denmark, the first license to operate autonomous vehicles were given just a few weeks ago. So we will begin to see these small buses driving around in Denmark without any drivers in them, not just in DTU and in closed facilities, but also in a more public way. We also had one big disaster last year. I predicted that Samsung would launch the first foldable phone with kind of a foldable screen, and they did in April, and just a week later they had to pull it back because the technology wasn't there. The screen cracked and there was dust coming in, and it was not just ready for launch at this point of time. So that created a lot of disturbance and a lot of troubles for Samsung. 5 months later, in September, they finally launched the product. I'm still a little bit, I'm not sure this is going to be a big success. It's a $2,000 phone, but there's another phone coming out in 2020 that I personally look forward to because I think it has a lot of interesting things around it.
Hello, Moto. They don't make 'em like me no more. One thing I know for sure, they don't make 'em like me no more. Shining like a supernova, brand new code hanging on my shoulders. I got what you need, I'm your main controller. So hop right in and don't take it slower. Get on up to my cloud, ain't nobody here's taking us down. Hit 'em with the rhythm, banging that sound. That's when we get 'em, hit the whole town. Got what you want, I got what you need. You bring the life.
So I don't know how many of you remember the Razr phone. Personally, that was my favorite phone for a very long time. And now they're launching a new version with a foldable screen. Expected coming to the market in 2020. And also Microsoft are launching their first phone for quite a while, the Surface Duo, again with a foldable screen. So we haven't seen the latest of this technology, but whether it's going to be a huge success, I don't know for sure, but it's definitely worth to take a look at. And that kind of leads me to my predictions for 2020. So I have 10 areas to cover. I'm going to go quite fast through them, so I hope you're okay with that. And hopefully at the end we'll have time for a few questions as well. So are you ready? Okay.
I'm Jim Eskerman, and I wrote a poem about what it feels like to be an impressionist. Is anything more sad and lame, contemptible, beneath disdain, in short, provoking of disgust, than being an impressionist? A third-rate, even fourth-rate skill. The definition of cheap thrill. Like watching farm equipment rust is watching an impressionist. Relic from a distant day that long since should have died away, dishonorably mentioned is the pitiful impressionist.
And it keeps going on. Could you see what happened here? And could you recognize some of the faces? Actually, if you saw the whole video, it would go through 25 different actors. It's an example of the technology called deepfake. And it's in some way extremely scary what's possible today, but it's also extremely impressive how we can actually play with this technology and lure us in to see something that is not really happening. We're not that far away from a situation where we would be able to ask Alexa to create a sci-fi western with Travolta, Jennifer Aniston, and Elon Musk in the leading roles. That's kind of one of the things that this new technology will lead to. But at the same time, and the most scary part is that it also means that we might live in what is called the post-truth era. I'm not the only one saying this. Just within the last few years, a lot of books have been written about this topic. So if you want to dig into this, here's a few titles that might be interesting to take a look at. And the loss of trust has several aspects to it. One of them, of course, is the whole thing about fake news and deep fakes. But it also has to do with all the data that keeps being collected about us. And we see now that the big services are beginning to actually give us a glimpse into the data they have. I went to Google to see if they could tell me where I've been for the last 10 years, and they showed this map with 236 places where they know that I've been within the last 10 years. You can also go to Facebook and ask them to compile a file with all the information they have about you, and then you can download it. I did that. It was a whopping 1.4 gigabyte. I've been on Facebook for 12 years. They have every comment, every post, every thread, every picture, everything about me. They even had my whole address book from my mobile phone available. And this is just the information that Facebook shows me. Then there's all the other stuff that they know that they are not willing to tell me. So this is one part of the trust issue. Can we really trust that this data doesn't get misused, will not be used to nudge us in a specific direction, or maybe even to harm us later on? Another area of this has to do with fraud. This is a message I got on LinkedIn from one of my friends. He's actually a lawyer. I'm sure a lot of you have received these personal messages. I've downloaded this file, check it out, and promise me never to click on it, because then your computer will freeze. And because these are all the same, they're pretty easy to spot. Then there's the other kind, this one, where they come out and say, well, we have actually been recording what you're doing in front of your screen, and it's not nice, so if you don't pay us a lot of money, we'll actually publish this online. I can tell you that this is almost always a hoax. But of course, if you're not tech savvy and you get a message like this, you get extremely scared, and you might tend to start sending money to these guys, and then they'll never stop. This is kind of the consumer side to it, but of course businesses are hit as well. We don't get all the stories out there, but Søren Nielsen from William Demand was brave enough to go public a few weeks ago and tell the story about how William Demand was taken down by a DDoS attack, and that it actually ended up costing them over 600 million Danish kroner because they were out of business for a month. So this is still a huge issue and something we need to address, and that's part of the trust thing as well. Then there's all the different AI algorithms that are now beginning to be involved in critical decisions about us in health areas and in financial areas, and they will end up with some kind of conclusion where it's very, very difficult to actually know exactly how they derived at that answer, because these algorithms are not transparent. You cannot trace each step of the decision going backwards, and the algorithms will never be better than the actual data set that it was trained on. So there's also a risk of bias. So if you live in a specific place, have a certain age, you might not be allowed alone just because the data set tells that that makes a lot of sense. And then on top of that, we have the kind of nagging feeling that we get surveilled all the time. Like, for example, with Siri. Apple actually went public in August apologizing for listening in on conversation through Siri, which of course is a bit scary. There's a lot of jokes about this. I like this one from James Franco. My wife asked me why I spoke so softly in the house. I said I was afraid Mark Zuckerberg was listening in. She laughed, I laughed, Alexa laughed, and Siri laughed. And then, of course, this one where the kid said to Mark Zuckerberg, my dad told me you're spying on us, and Mark says he's not your dad. So, but seriously, you have all tried this. You talk about something, and minutes later, ads start popping up on your mobile phone about the topic. You're like, okay, how did that happen? I've never talked about this before. I've never got ads like this before. Luckily, Denmark is punching way above our weight in this area. We are among the first countries in the world that have a national strategy for artificial intelligence. We have a national AI ethic board that works very closely with these issues. And we have Margrethe Vestager. And she's actually responsible for getting EU up to speed and preparing them for the future as well. I do, however, predict that this is a thing we all need to get involved in. we need to understand the implications of everything we do and all the services we are linked up to, because it's going to have consequences, and we need to understand better what's happening out there, what data are they collecting about us, are we okay with that? So I think the debate in 2020 will become much broader, not just something that elitists are discussing, but something we all need to take a stand on and understand better than we did in the past. The next thing I'm going to talk about is kind of in the same area, and that has to do with the development within computer vision and facial recognition technologies. It is quite interesting to see how fast this technology went from being something out of a science fiction movie to something we pretty much use every day without thinking about it. Because right now, if you want to log on to your bank or to a public service and you use the NemID app, facial recognition is the way you authenticate that you're actually the person that you are and give you access directly to these services. And we've kind of come to live with this within a very short time span. But this technology is developing very, very fast. We've just seen the tip of the iceberg. This scenario is very likely to happen within a short period of time, where you point your phone at somebody, the phone will tell you who it is, but it will also tell you how Sandra is feeling and a few health data on top of that. We call that emotion detection. Just to show you a little example of how the technology works, it scans your face and then it knows exactly, depending on your expressions, whether you're happy, angry, afraid, disgusted, or whatever it is. And this is just a simple example of this technology. We see this being rolled out in airports around the world, both for the possibility to check in with your face, but also to get through security much faster and much easier. And once you're recognized, when you enter the airport, like in China, you can go up to a smart screen like this one, and just by looking into the screen, they will recognize you from your check-in and immediately show all the information that is relevant to you, your boarding card, your gate and the way to your gate, and also which lounge you might be allowed to. They might even point out which shops would be relevant to you based on the information they have. Another example where this technology is put in place is in supermarkets, not just in US, but also in China. But this example is from Amazon Go. It's actually a company called Standard Cognition, and their claim to fame is walk in, take things, walk out. I like that. I think it's pretty simple. And they also say that we don't use facial recognition. We don't need that. We use something we call overhead cameras. So there are cameras in the ceiling actually looking in at what you put in your basket. And they're able to see that not only that you take ketchup and not mustard, but also the size of the ketchup bottle that you put into your basket. A lot of people have tried to hack this and see if they could cheat and steal and stuff, and they get taken every time. The technology is extremely precise already today. So this is just one example of how this is going to be rolled out going forward. We can also use this technology together with AI to predict intent. Actually to say, okay, what is this person going to do in a short while? For example, if we look at shoplifting. This is an example again from China where they surveil this guy and then suddenly they can see, oh, something is happening, and the suspicious percentage goes from 30 to 90. So they kind of know that this person might be likely to be shoplifting, and maybe we should go and grab this guy before he goes out of the store and actually become a criminal. There's a scary backside to this, and that is kind of the loss of privacy and the feeling that we get surveilled all the time. It's especially scary when you look at China. I'm sure most of you have read about the social credit score, where they surveil the citizens in China and then rate them based on their behavior. So if you jaywalk or you don't deliver your books to the library in time, you might not be allowed to fly or stuff like that. And of course, this is extremely scary. It's almost like watching an episode of Black Mirror in real time. But that's just how it is. In 2020, we'll have the Olympics, and our mother company, NEC, will be responsible for the check-in technology. And it's going to be AI-powered facial recognition across the whole facility. So every athlete and other pre-vetted personnel going in and out will be checked in through facial recognition, basically to allow more convenience and a higher level of safety. So this is, I think, one of the reasons why we're going to talk a lot about this in 2020, because all journalists will pick this up and say, wow, look what happened and how I actually got in and out. So there's going to be a lot of press about this. So I predict that the use of computer vision and facial recognition will explode in 2020. Emotional detection, as I showed, we will see the first commercial implementations in real-time systems next year. And we're going to see some really, really exciting use cases, but we're also going to see some pretty scary ones. And we all need to take a stand on this as well. Any of you know this guy? No. His name, I think, is He Xianghui. And he is the doctor that decided to go in and gene edit 2 embryos and create what is now known as the CRISPR twins. This is not the actual CRISPR twins, by the way, but the reason why I can't show a picture of them is that he disappeared and they disappeared a few weeks after this was launched publicly. It was broadly condemned all across the world because entering genes on embryos and actually playing God and changing behavior of human beings is not something we have agreed is okay. But it's a technology that is now available, and it's called CRISPR-Cas. It promised to eliminate all genetic diseases, like, for example, hemophilia. We have a lot of these kind of patients in Denmark, and it costs approximately 200,000 per month to treat a hemophilia patient. Now there's a drug where you can get one treatment and it'll cure you immediately, which is fantastic. The challenge here is, how should we price this? So if you're a patient looking at 20 years of treatment at a price of 200,000 per month, and now you can get one injection and you're cured, what should be the price of that injection? I can give you another example. There's another genetic disease called spinal muscular atrophy. Basically, you are no muscles in your body are able to move, so you're paralyzed sitting there. You can talk and your brain is working, but not your body. Novartis has now launched an FDA-approved treatment called Zolgensma, where in one infusion they can solve this problem and cure this patient. But the price right now is $2.1 million. So, insurance companies, states, are right now arguing whether we are willing to pay this price and whether this is a fair price. Because can we really put a price to life? So again, there's a lot of ethical discussion in this. It takes an hour, one infusion, and then you're done. And gene editing is also, as a technology, evolving really, really fast. If CRISPR-Cas is to compare with a scissor and a pencil, then the next generation of gene editing technology called prime editing is much more like a word processor. You can copy-paste through the whole gene mass. You can do all kind of swappings and deletions, much more than you could with the CRISPR-Cas technology. There are fewer errors, it's much more precise, and it can solve much more problems. Another new technology is called gene drive, and that's the ability to go in and change the gene pool of a whole species, like, for example, malaria-carrying mosquitoes. So you gene edit one mosquito, and when it mates with another one, it has a stronger gene pool, so that's a gene pool that will be carried on, and within a few generations, the old malaria-carrying mosquito will be totally eradicated. But what we don't know is the unknown consequences of changing the gene pool in a whole species. So of course, there's heavy debate whether this should be done or not. But just to give you an example, and they also call it gene knockout, which is an American phrase. I think that is much more strong. But if we look at malaria, the latest malaria report tells us that almost 220 million cases were about malaria in 2017, and 435,000 people died, and the majority are kids under the age of 5. So we always have to wait and balance and say, okay, can we live with this? if we now know that we might be able to cure this, but we don't know what the consequences will be, think about if we kind of inject something that means that these mosquitoes become resistant or carry another disease or whatever. So of course, this is both very interesting, but it's also extremely frightening. It is, however, a technology you can now go online and buy. You can order it on this website, a Gene Knockout Kit version 2.0. And if you want to play with this at home, you can go to a website called theodin.com and buy your first do-it-yourself gene engineering CRISPR kit for $159. And if you want to be a little bit more advanced, you can buy the gene engineering home lab kit. That's going to set you back with almost $2,000. Then you're good to go. You have everything, and you can start doing that in your kitchen. And a lot of nerds are doing this. We call them biohackers, and they get together in communities like this one. This is called Syntech Bio, and as you can see, here we have 4,000 science lovers and hackers and nerds that are comparing results, changing ideas, talking about what can be done. Should we create new species of dogs that light in the dark or whatever? And it is quite scary, and it's very, very hard to contain because it's easy and it's cheap. If you want to dig deeper into this, I strongly recommend the Netflix series called Unnatural Selection. It's a 4-episode series, and it's really, really good. So between Christmas and New Year, you might spend a few hours looking at it and get a little bit wise about this technology because it's here to stay. And I predict that in 2020, we are going to see several major FDA-approved new treatments, and we're also going to see some new technology breakthroughs within this area. But of course, at the same time, we're going to also see a heated debate about this topic. So all the things I've talked about already today, you can see that there's two sides to it, right? There's the technological development, which is fascinating, but there's also the ethical part of it and the consequences it's going to have for our life. And for me, that's one of the new things that is all across the board when I look into the years to come. Because we are now getting at a point where technology gets so advanced that it has the possibility to change stuff that we are getting used to, that is going to change our world as we know it, and we as human beings need to take a stand on this. So this is not so serious as the other things, but this is more fun because kind of having things delivered by drone is one of these crazy ideas that we have been entertaining ourselves with for quite a while now, but now it seems to happen. The Google-owned company called Wing are now starting to delivering products in Virginia through drones. And UPS recently got a full FDA approval across US to deliver products with drones, with as many drones as they like. Uber have launched their Uber Eats drone, and they say that during summer they will begin to deliver fast food in San Diego. So this is something that is now beginning to happen as a commercial service. Of course, China is in on this as well. Antworks have gotten a full drone delivery license across China to deliver products in urban areas, and they have a full setup already today with these heli pads where you can put things in a robot. It's get directly delivered into one of these unmanned drones, and then it'll fly directly to your house. In Denmark, we're not not advanced yet. We have the first license to do commercial drone flights. It's a medical project in Fyn, where a project called Health Drone will deliver samples between hospitals. So we are in there. But I think that this is a kind of last mile delivery that will shift from being a test project or a rarity to something that will become more and more an everyday phenomenon in a lot of places around the world going forward. Now I want to talk a little bit about 3D printing. And I think a lot of you have this kind of notion about 3D printing, that you can print these silly plastic things that you cannot really use for anything. And once the initial kind of amazement gets over, then it's not that interesting. But a lot of stuff is happening in that area. Just look at what happened a few months ago, where this actually took place. It's a full boat being 3D printed, and later on being able to sail with carrying at least 6 persons. In Netherlands, the first steel bridge was 3D printed and will now be set up in Amsterdam. And we see more and more companies starting to use this technology in a commercial way. And we start to call it additive manufacturing instead of 3D printing. This is a company called Align Technology, and they help you if you have weird teeth. Instead of getting the old, steel bracelets, you now get an invisible plastic bracelet, and it's going to change every 2 to 3 weeks. They're going to send it to you over the mail, and you just change it to a new one, and within 6 to 8 months, your smile is corrected. You can buy it here in Denmark. A treatment costs approximately 30,000 kroner, and it can only be done in that way because of 3D printing. More than 7 million people have had their smiles corrected with this technology, which basically also means that this company now have a market cap of over $20 billion. But there are a lot of other examples. One example is Adidas and Under Armour that are beginning to 3D print running shoes based on how you actually build as a person. So you can specify exactly what kind of sole you want. We have examples in our gadget lab with lamps from Philips, luminaires, where you can go in and design them online and have them printed. We have an example from a Danish company called Monocool, where you can have glasses 3D printed. And there's another company that print bike helmets based on your head and your weight and so on. We have this gadget lab down here, so when we take a break, I urge you all to go in there and take a look at all this stuff, because there's a lot of interesting new technologies on display for you, which you should take a look at. But this is leaving the lab and becoming more and more commercial. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of business advantage in additive manufacturing. Just to mention a few, if you are in the prototype phase, it's a much easier way to prototype how your product should look and do trial and error testing. You can do the mass customization needed for braces or hearing aids or bike helmets. You can even print on location, so you don't have to ship the stuff. You can just ship the printing material. And there's now more than 500 different materials that you can print in, including glass, wood, of course metal, and even chocolate. And then you can work with much smaller batches, which, for example, if you do airplane production, you never do more than 20 to 50 airplanes at a time. So it's hard to build a factory for the components if you only need 50. So in a lot of industries, it makes sense to work with small-scale productions. That's just a few of the advantages in this technology. In Denmark, we have now something called the Danish AM Hub that works to broaden the knowledge and the experience with additive manufacturing, not just in large companies like Danfoss and Grundfos and Maersk and Lego, but also in small and medium enterprises, because we think that's really where the big advantage can be. So I think 2020 will be the year where this will go from being some kind of a niche thing to something that we all know about, and it's much more accepted, and it's going to become a widely accepted commercial production technique that will be used in more industries than before. There is a sister technology to this, and here's an example of another product that was 3D printed. This is from General Motors. It's the fixture for your seatbelt. This is how it used to look. It's an 8-part fixture, so it's made of 8 different parts. And now instead, they decided to create one part, and it's 3D printed, and it looks very, very different from the one that there were before. So as you can see here, So there's a big shift from the old version with 8 parts to the other one. And the good thing about it is not just that you don't need to have 8 different parts on your storage facility, it's also 40% lighter and 20% stronger. But how did they derive at this weird look? Well, they went through a lot of iterations, and basically they decided to put specifications about the design into an algorithm and then have the computer do the design work. And it's a new way of working where the role of designers are changing from being the one that are actually crafting the design to the one that are deciding on the factors needed for this to be a success, and then choosing between the different suggestions that the computer will bring forward. And this is actually already today something that are used commercially. Take a look at this one.
At Callaway, we have engineers who get paid to come up with big ideas, like Jailbreak, the technology that revolutionized driver performance. Last year, they asked the big boss for a supercomputer, the kind with artificial intelligence. You know, AI, like you've seen in the movies. He gave the go-ahead to buy the biggest, smartest one they could find. At HQ, they gave it instructions. Take this head and design the fastest face possible. The supercomputer got busy and produced more than 15,000 virtual prototypes, learning from each until it arrived at V1, a face unlike anything we'd ever seen before, full of crazy waves and peaks that'd take a regular computer 34 years to come up with. Trust us, we did the math. So they tested it, and holy flash did it work. It makes your fastest ball speed even faster, and your longest drives even longer. We call it Flash Face, and you'll only find it in our new Epic Flash driver, Callaway's first ever golf club designed by AI. Try it and see the difference. As for our supercomputer, we think it's earned a rest. For now.
So very American, I know, but still quite an interesting example of a technology that went from a curiosity to something that is now commercialized into this driver. And if you look at Golf Digest, they actually gave it a pretty high rating as one of the best drivers out there right now, and the face of the driver was designed with generative design. Another example of this is in the airplane industry. These walls are the delimiter walls within the plane, and Airbus have redesigned them with this technology, so they are now much longer, much lighter, and much stronger. But at the same time, they are actually now working on how the next generation of planes should look like, so we can actually save fuel when we fly around. But it's really, really fascinating. I have an example here from the engineering company called AOP. This one is a product that they design manually to have wires going in a lot of different directions to hold stuff. It's for lighting in cities. It's a pretty heavy thing, and they decided to put the algorithm in charge of making a redesign, and they came up with this one. You can see later on display. It's 75% lighter, but it actually can do the same job as this one. But no human being would never arrive at a design like this. So it is pretty interesting, but also, again, a little bit scary because we don't know exactly how the algorithm is thinking when it's doing the design. The world's fastest motorbike is an e-bike. They are using it again to change the chassis and make it a lighter and stronger motorbike. And we even see it within architectural design. This is the new Chengdu Museum of Natural History in China, and they use this technology as well to create lighting and different things within the building. So we are gonna need to keep optimizing our products, and we also need to do stuff in a more sustainable way. And this is why the combination of additive manufacturing and computational design is a very successful cocktail. I'm quite sure we're gonna see a lot of interesting and great commercial products being developed and being brought into the market in a combination of these two technologies in 2020. If you want to know more about this, you should take a look at Autodesk's website, because they're the one that are right now having the best software for this, and there's a lot of interesting cases in there. Well, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the development in computational power. It seems like there's a common understanding that Moore's law that has been happening for the last 50 years, with a doubling of computer power every 18 to 24 months, is now coming to an end. We see the launch of 7 nanometer technology chips, and we even see that Samsung have announced that they will be able to do 3 nanometer processors. But we are getting very, very close to the physical limitations of how small transistors we can actually produce. And that basically means that this way of doing computers will flat out. But luckily, there are new technologies waiting outside to take over. And one of them is quantum computers. It's a pretty advanced thing and quite hard to comprehend how these works. So I won't spend time on that. Just tell you that they claim that quantum computers will be 100 million times faster than the classic computers we know today. If you recall Deep Blue winning over the best chess player, Garry Kasparov, a long time ago, that computer were able to do 200 million chess moves per second in order to beat that guy. If this was done by a quantum computer, the computer would be able to do 1 trillion chess moves. That's 5,000 times more moves per second. So that just kind of shows how strong these computers are. And they are already there. There are, I think, 4 or 5 countries around the world that are producing quantum computers. One of them is D-Wave. It's a big one, and it operates under quite extreme situations. It operates very, very close to the absolute zero, which is minus 273 degrees. It needs to operate with almost no magnetic field. So inside this box, it's shielded to a magnetic field 50,000 times less than the one we have outside. And it needs to be in a complete vacuum as well. So of course, it's pretty hard to produce. And it can't be used for all kind of assignments. So that's also why everybody think that it's going to be a combination of quantum computers with existing supercomputers that will be the winning formula going forward. And just 2 days ago, NEC came out with this news that they would partner up with D-Wave to kind of integrate these two technologies, traditional supercomputers with quantum computers, to reach the different quantum apps that would be interesting going forward. And if we look at the use cases for this, it's all the cases where we have a lot of variables at the same time, like weather, for example, or cryptography, or extremely complex financial models, or drug research where we have to follow each atom around to see what happens, or supply chain logistics where we need to find the smartest route with 1,000 or millions of cars driving around at the same time. So there are a lot of use cases for this technology, but it can be used for everything. When we talk about quantum supremacy, we talk about the situation where a quantum computer are able to solve a problem that simply can't be solved by classical computers. When that happens, we talk about quantum supremacy. And a few months ago, Google claimed that they have actually reached quantum supremacy by solving a theoretical assignment that no computer would be able to solve. Then a month later, IBM came out and said, no, we're not sure about that. We actually think with some clever programming, our best supercomputers could solve the same assignment in 5 days. So we might not be there right now, but I'm quite sure that we will see a true quantum supremacy moment in 2020. This technology is still some years away from being widely accessible, maybe 5 to 10 years, but we will to see it being deployed in specific areas, and but it's still a rare phenomena, but it might be the next generation of computers when we move forward from here. Now, let's go to something a little bit more closer to our everyday life. I'm sure you can all remember this situation from Matador, where Mads Gjern had to sit in the bank and wait all day just to find out that the managing director actually didn't have time for him. That's not how banking works today. More and more we see new bank solutions coming up, where it's 24/7, mobile only. It's developed around your needs and your situation. It's extremely good digital solutions and functionalities in a very user-friendly way. This is just one example. It's called Starling Bank. It was launched in 2017, just 2 years ago. They now have more than 1 million accounts and 1.2 billion euros in customer assets. So this is just one example of how quick this developed. And there are a lot of them around the world, and it seems to work. If we just take a few of them, Monzo and N26, they both have more than 3 million customers right now. So something is right about this new way of doing banking. And what we here in Charlie Tango particularly find interesting is the next level of personalization that we will be able to do once a financial solution is truly digital. So every information we get will be about us and our personal information. It will be delivered in real time. And through technologies like AI and big data, the services will be able to predict the kind of challenges we have or the situation we will run into and give us very, very useful advice and something we can actually act upon. This is kind of right now a dream scenario for a lot of us, but this is the kind of situation we would like to end up with, not just in the financial sector, but in a lot of different areas. So we end up in a situation where I would claim that when I show up online, my bank actually know who I am, and they have already anticipated the needs I have and helped me manage my day-to-day financial life. And I would actually trust the recommendations much more because they're based on my situation. In here we call this breaking the wall, and we think this is a huge challenge for pretty much all industries around. We have created this white paper that is so fresh that it'll be delivered in here at 10 o'clock, hopefully, so you all get a chance to get a copy. And here you can read more about how we think that we can begin to work this way and become much more digital in our customer service than we used to be. But this is just one area that is hitting the banks. We have this bank in Denmark called Lunaway, which is one good example of a new bank. They're doing quite well. Targeted young people this would be the first bank out there, and it's a 100% digital free solution. Their app gets extremely good ratings as well, so they have focused on the digital solution. If we look at the fintech scene, these are the number of fintechs that are attacking the financial sector in a lot of different areas. So a lot is happening here as well. And on top of that, we see a lot of non-traditional bank brands enter the game and starting to deliver services. Google will begin to offer bank accounts in 2020. Facebook have already launched in US what they call Facebook Pay, which is similar to mobile pay, just within the Messenger app. Apple have launched the most advanced credit card in the world. We see Amazon linking a bank account to your Prime subscription in US as well. And Walmart and Uber are doing this as well. So a lot of new competitors coming in. So right now, the traditional banks are a little bit in this situation. They are taking a hit from a lot of different areas, because I have not even touched on regulation, like PSD2 or MiFID II. The fact that we now have negative interest rates for quite a while and this doesn't seem to change in the foreseeable future, and the general negative attitude that we have towards traditional banks. So I actually think that the combination of all these factors mean that we will begin to see the end of banks as we know them. So 2020 will be the year where we will begin to see a shift in power and a shift in the way we as users will have a banking relationship to maybe a non-traditional bank brand, maybe a new bank or one of these challengers coming up. And this will be a big challenge to the existing financial institutions that we have out there. On top of that, we are also getting closer and closer to what you could call the cashless society. I don't have the Danish numbers, but I know that in Sweden, they predict that next year, less than 0.5% of the total value of transactions will be done by real cash. So it's time also that we start to rethink the whole concept of money and value. The existing monetary system we have was developed a long time ago, way before the digital situation we have today, way before the digital solutions that we're now using. And that's also why I predict that we will see a comeback in the area of cryptocurrencies. This is the development of the actual value of the Bitcoin. And this is also one of the problems, because as you can see, it peaked very highly right around New Year's Eve 2018, and then it dropped very, very fast. And we need to take our focus away from the value of this currency and instead focus on what we can do with it and how it can work. And that's interesting that now we are seeing a lot of new currencies called stablecoins being developed and introduced. So a stablecoin is similar to Bitcoin. It's a cryptocurrency with all the assets and possibilities available, but it will be pegged to existing national currencies like the euro and the dollar, and maybe even a basket of different things. So you take out the volatility, and you just stay with the ways that we can use it going forward. This is called DAI, and it's actually partly Danish developed, and it's quite successful. But the most interesting project that I think will be launched in 2020 is the launch of the new stablecoin called Libra, which is currently backed by approximately 20 partners, one of them being Facebook. So Facebook want to launch their own currency to their 2.5 billion customers. And of course, that scares the shit out of a lot of people. So during the last months, we have seen a lot of writing about this. The CEO of JP Morgan went out and say, this is never going to happen. They have to stand in front of Congress and defend themselves for 2 days. Even Lars Rode went out and say, no, this is not good. I don't like this. And the whole EU finance ministers are actually also putting a ban on Libra, saying that before we know and understand this completely, we really don't like it. So you could say that the verdict is out. Is this actually going to happen in 2020 or not? This is my bold prediction for this year. I predict that it is going to happen. It is going to launch in 2020, and I actually think that behind the curtain, they will be able to get a much broader backing than we see right now publicly. And this is because we have 1.7 billion people that are unbanked, who this will help a lot, and with 2.5 billion customers just within the Facebook community, I think there's so much value in this, it's very, very hard to stop. But whether it's going to be this or one of the other cryptocurrencies, I think it's worth taking a look at when we enter 2020 and look out for the development in this area. Now, my final prediction is also quite a serious one. It's now, in a few weeks from now, it's 2020, which basically means that we have 10 years to solve the 17 UN sustainability goals if we want to reach what we set out to do in 2015. These are the 17 largest problems that we have in the world right now. And in order to go there within the next 10 years, we're going to need all the technology we can find, because otherwise it's not going to happen. But the problem with all these technologies is, as I'm shown today, there are always two sides to the story. On one side, they create a lot of progress and a lot of convenience and new possibilities, but on the other side, it creates mistrust, it creates new pollution and new problems. Just take the mobile phone. We all love it, but each year right now, 1.5 billion smartphones get ditched. Think about this enormous mass of phones being thrown away each year. Not talking about the rare minerals within these phones as well. We also love all these new services, all these digital services available, but it basically also means that we create a lot more data. Every second year, the amount of data will be doubled, and that means that we need a lot of data centers that takes up a lot of power, another problem. We also love e-commerce. Right now, 2,600 packages are being sent every second. Think about the enormous amount of waste that this creates due to e-commerce. And when you receive a package, it looks a little bit like this. This is actually a picture I took of a package I received here in the office. And the problem is that most of the packets consist of, yes, air. Forbes predicted that each year 61 million containers of air are shipped around the world due to e-commerce. That's terrible, and it's crazy. So these are problems we just need to solve while we keep innovating and developing new sustainable digital solutions and technologies if we want to conquer the biggest challenges we have. I think that the whole sustainability agenda and the UN 17 sustainability goals will take up a lot of space in the newspapers in the year to come, and it's something that all companies around the world will need to take a stand on in order to survive. So there you have it, 10 predictions for 2020. I hope you found this interesting. I don't know if you agree with me on this, and if you don't, you please let us know. I have put out, and I'm still doing that, a new video each morning on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page, where I talk about these 10 different predictions, and there's a lot of rooms for discussion and commenting, and I would love to hear what you think about this. What did I miss? What don't you agree on? And are there things here that you think will move much faster than I have predicted? But now it's time for a break. It's time for some coffee, and please also take a visit to our gadget lab, and we'll be back in, let's say, what time? How much? 30 minutes from now.